This is Harry Davis from Mirror Fighting, and I'm joined by Paige VanZant ahead of her big boxing fight against Elle Brooke in Texas. Paige, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Hanging out, doing media, relaxing in bed.
Is it sort of nice or not nice to be doing media again after quite a while out of the game, right?
Um, it's part of the job. It's neither here nor there.
Mm. I was watching an interview with Elle because you're very different experience levels when she was saying, look, boxing, makes her cry at night, sleepless nights as well, and every time she has a fight, it feels like it's 10 years of her life. Can you relate and do you feel the same way, especially going back to your UFC and BKFC career?
It depends, every fight's different. The emotions going into it are different. The fight week is different. Um, but yeah, I can definitely agree to like the emotions of a fight week. It's nerve-wracking. You've trained your whole, 6 months or more to fight somebody across the world that's been training to fight you. So fighting is one of the most daunting things that you can do. So it's hard unless you've done it to really explain.
Mm, mm. I remember again looking at the posters behind me, going back to the sort of 2015-16 era where it was all about Paige and Sage, and we're almost what 9 years on from that point, and you're only 30. Do you ever think back of how young you were at the time, and you were sort of touted, the same with Sage too, at the big next thing as the UFC, and it probably seems like maybe it was only a year ago, or does it seem like longer?
I don't know. Honestly, it all runs together. I had such an amazing time in the UFC and such an amazing career. And looking back, it's like, yeah, was really young when I signed. I signed to the UFC when I was 19 years old. It's something that not a lot of people get to say that they do, and not a lot of people actually get to fight for the UFC. So, it was an honor, and I loved every second that I had with them.
Mm. Dana White always says about the it factor, and you're someone that he said has that. Do you ever think maybe a return if he said, "Look, Paige, you're always welcome back with open arms"? Is that something that maybe you'd be up for, or are you firmly done on MMA at this point?
I don't know. I mean, I think the door is open. It's maybe open, maybe closed. Honestly, I'm just doing what I love. I found this new passion for boxing, and I'm having so much fun with my coaches and my team just preparing for this boxing match. So I really just look at whatever opportunity is in front of me and focus on that.
Mm. I remember during the UFC days, obviously you're with Alpha Male at the time, and now you're at ATT. So what has the sort of prep been like? The gym has some great females, the likes of Kayla Harrison, who's now in the UFC, Dakota Dicheva, PFL star Mara Silva. But what has the sort of training partners been like? We know the coaches there, but who have you been training with on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I've been training with some incredible women, two of which are in the UFC. And then just I mean everybody at that gym, it's invite only. So everybody is extremely talented. And it's just nice to know that when I look around that um the people I spar with are way better than my opponent. So I feel like it just puts me in a position of confidence to know that I have done absolutely everything that I can to be prepared.
Mm. Funny story. I spoke to Elle moments after her last boxing win, and this was in January, and she said to me, I'm not going to get big for my boots and call out a UFC fighter next. And then we fast forward, what, 5 months, and she's fighting you. And I think it even took her a bit by surprise on how this fight came around. But do you understand maybe when people are saying, God, Elle was definitely bitten off a bit more that you could chew here?
I understand. I mean, obviously, I'm going into this extremely confident, but I'm also going into this as like the first of many. I prepared for to become the new champion and then also defend it time and time and time again. So, um, yeah, I can definitely understand. Obviously, I have an extensive MMA and fighting career coming from bare knuckle boxing. I did 10 rounds in bare knuckle boxing. So, um, yeah, I understand what people are probably saying and thinking, but also taking this extremely seriously because I do know that one, it's a fight, anything can happen, and two, it's the first of many.
Hmm. I remember watching an interview we did with Misfits, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, when they were asking you about boxers transitioning over to, sorry, MMA fighters transitioning over to boxing and asking about Dylan Dannison and Ben Askren. And you're in the news a bit because Ben re responded to that tweet. I think he said, it wasn't worth me replying to. I appreciate that. I think someone had pointed out that he was like, oh, I had a significantly better career than hers. Did you see his reply to you on Twitter? And if so, did you have any response to it?
I did not know. Honestly, I do stay off social media before my fights, so it's pretty nice to just relax.
Hmm. So I'm guessing you haven't seen, obviously, Dylan is more known for his activity on social media than he's been in the ring or octagon recently. But what did you make of him going back for? Maybe you didn't even see what he was saying to you online.
I didn't see a lot of it. But for me, arguing with an idiot just proves that there's two. So I just, you know, I don't kick a dead horse.
I remember when you signed with BKFC, it was well documented that I think you were making 10 times what you're making in the UFC. And then when you go to content creation with OF, I think there was a headline that said you made more in 20 for the first 24 hours than you did in your entire fighting career. Is this true? And since then, I'm guessing it's been even more and more so. So is that the case?
Um, I mean, I do well, and I do very well at everything I do. I work really hard at everything I do. I think it's distasteful to talk about finances. So for me, I'm just doing what I love, and I know that anything I touch, I'm going to turn to gold.
Do you understand people though that say, look, you can make so much money off doing this without being punched in the face? I know obviously your love for fighting comes through above and all, but do you understand the people that say, wow, if you're making so much from this, why go back to bare knuckle? Why go to boxing?
I mean, my question is why not?
Mm.
I mean, like if you love something, you're just not going to do it just because you don't have to. When you love something, you do it. Just that's it.
I remember when you signed with BKFC about what 3 years ago. You know, since then they've blown up, especially in the last year with
Mhm.
likes of Conor McGregor investing. What have you made? Because I know you got one fight left in the deal, and you've always said, look, I want to go back eventually. But with McGregor now investing in them, they've gone onwards and upwards. So what did you make, and were you surprised when you saw McGregor put a bit of money behind him?
I think it's awesome. I think they're making incredible power moves. BKFC is really taken off. Dade Feldman, their president, um, he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's been in the game for a very, very long time. So I'm not surprised by how well that they have grown over the last few years, and I really anticipate them continuing to take off because they're doing everything right.
Hmm. I remember you say as well when you're speaking to Elle, you know, maybe the results didn't go your way, but your last two opponents, one had a broken nose, the other had teeth out. So the next opponent in Elle, do you foresee maybe some sort of similar damage to her or not?
I know it's going to be a really good fight, so that's it. Everyone just has to tune in.
Mm. When I'm going back to the UFC, I remember, as you say, you signed at the age of 19 and your career was just plagued not only by tough opponents who are still at the top of the game in the UFC, but arm injuries as well. I think you had like 3 or 4 fractures to the same arm. Do you ever think, wow, like maybe if I didn't get the injuries and I had more time, where you could have been in the UFC?
No, honestly, it's all in God's plan. It's in his hands, and every I've learned over the years, like every win is great, but every loss is great too. It's experience. Those camps weren't wasted. I used every ounce of training, and those are still stored energy. It's stored skill. It's preparing me for the next opportunity. So yeah, I've had unfortunate injuries, but that's a part of being a fighter, and everybody has injuries.
For someone who's still obviously involved in the fight game but been not been actually fighting, do you watch from the sidelines? Do you like when these big UFC events come up like UFC 300 as a fan, do you watch or do you maybe find it quite hard to watch because you get the itch to get back in there?
No, I watch all fights. I love watching combat sports. I mean, we watch literally everything. We'll be watching the PFL, we're watching the UFC. It's whatever is on. I just watched, the Lomachenko fight. So it's not just a part of my life, it's my whole life. So yeah, I love watching combat sports.
Mm. And going to the BKFC fights, I remember when you fought, I think it was Britain Hart in the first fight, and now she's gone on to do great things. And then you fight someone like Elle, and usually whenever everyone says about a fight, oh, the next fight is the toughest fight of my life. But with someone with the inexperience of Elle compared to the likes of the girls you fought in the UFC and bare knuckle, do you think this is the toughest fight of your life or not?
I think it's the most important fight in my life because it's the next fight. The next fight is always the most important one.
And your partner Austin, who gets more grouchy during a fight camp when you're cutting weight, and who's the more, irritable to be around, you or him?
Definitely me. I am way more irritable around fight week than him, only because like I'm a foodie. I love eating. I love snacks. He is some sort of weird superhuman. He literally eats very clean and healthy, and that's what makes him happy. So when he's, cutting weight, it's just kind of like the same old thing where I definitely miss my food.
And as I mentioned, you turned what 30, I think 2 months ago. Some
Yep.
fighters they can never really see like retirement, but obviously you've been out of the game for a while. But do you ever think, wow, mate, I don't want to be good, because we see like Mike Tyson's back in the ring at 58 this summer. Do you set like an end goal of like, I don't want to have any more fights past the age of whatever, or do you not think really like that?
I don't think about that at all. Honestly, I'm obviously still very young. I just turned 30 in March. I just take opportunities that come my way, and if they're exciting, I say yes, and if they're not, I say no. And this is something that was really exciting to me, and yeah, had been training for, bare knuckle boxing. So for this, it's, same thing, but just have gloves on.
Mm. Just two more. Talk about sort of dream opponents, because there's a lot of UK. I know you didn't really know much about Misfits Boxing before you got the offer, but there's people like Elle who are very big here in the UK, and people like Katie Price, who's like a UK reality TV star here, who's been linked to a fight. But for the return in BKFC or even box in the future, do you have one sort of maybe like dream crossover opponent that you think, wow, she'd be actually someone perfect for me to stand across?
Not at all. I have gone my entire career without calling anybody out, without really caring. I just whoever, the UFC said this is your next opponent, I said yes, and it's the same situation here. Misfits will tell me who I'm gonna fight, and that'll be that.
Mm. And last one, I think going back to your last fight was July 2021, right?
Probably.
Mm. And that was the same month as McGregor's last fight. And I asked because obviously you say you watch all the fights now, and he's coming back in
Yep.
just over 2 months. He's now in BKFC, so sort of still kind of linked to your name there, because the fact that we're waiting your return there. But how do you see his comeback going for someone who's been out of the game for so long, and yourself and him? Do you think he can do the job against Chandler? And if so, how do you think he wins?
I'm really excited for that fight against Michael Chandler. I know it's a long time coming. Super big fan of Connor. I'm a very big fan of Michael Chandler as well. Um, Honestly, I don't like to make predictions on fights either. So I do know that I'm going to watch this one, and it should be extremely exciting. They're both incredibly talented. So yeah, we'll see.